Imagine this. An international body steps into a nation, really grappling with political turmoil, a nation struggling with its human rights record. How does that actually impact accountability? And, what are the hidden complexities when a global watchdog tries to make a difference locally?
Yeah, that's the fascinating story we're diving into today.
We're unpacking the recent establishment of a UN Human Rights Office in Bangladesh. We'll explore the critical context, what led up to it, and the really different expectations and, frankly, criticism swirling around it.
Exactly. And our goal is to try and cut through some of that noise to show you how this local development fits into the bigger picture, the often contentious world of global human rights monitoring. It's a very multifaceted situation.
For sure. And to do that, we've pulled from a pretty deep stack of sources, everything from local and international news, academic analyses, opinion pieces too. We really want to give you a comprehensive but still easy to grasp picture.
Yeah, what does this actually mean for human rights accountability in Bangladesh? Understand the different angles on the UN's influence and critically look at the challenges. Challenges for both local and international human rights bodies.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is this new UN Human Rights Office in Bangladesh?
Right, so our sources tell us the interim government of Bangladesh signed a 3-year Memorandum of Understanding, a MOU, with the UN.
Okay.
And this agreement basically sets up a country office of the UN's own human rights body, the OHCHR, right there in Dhaka.
So an official presence on the ground.
Exactly. And the MOU itself was signed by Volker Turk. He's the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and Asad Alam Siam, who's the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh.
Got it.
Now, what's interesting is, while the UN confirmed the signing in a press release from Geneva on July 18th, 2025, noting it happened earlier that week, the government of Bangladesh, well, at least as of the time of our sources, hadn't made an official announcement yet.
Huh. That's a subtle detail, isn't it?
It is. Kind of telling.
So why now? I mean, what's the immediate backstory here? What was the pivotal moment that really pushed this forward?
Well, it seems the timing is very closely linked to a UN fact-finding mission.
Right.
This mission investigated events not long after the July-August uprising in Bangladesh.
Ah, okay.
And that investigation, according to one of our sources, documented pretty widespread abuses by state forces under the previous Awami League, or AL, regime.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's quite telling that these OHCHR country offices, they're typically invited by national governments during periods of, significant transition, vulnerability, or maybe post-conflict reform.
And Bangladesh's situation seems to fit that description.
It certainly does. Sources highlight what they call a horrific track record of human rights violations, which just underscores the pressing need, the demand, really, for an international independent body to act as a watchdog.
Yeah.
The Sheikh Hasina regime is specifically cited by some sources as an example of power abuse, using various institutions reportedly to clamp down on citizens without any real consequences.
And the sources really dig into that, don't they? Detailing these persistent abuses under the AL regime. Things like enforced disappearances, people just vanishing, often linked to state forces, extrajudicial killings, torture, gender-based violence. It's a grim list. And during that July-August crackdown specifically, the state's use of excessive force reportedly led to over 1,400 deaths.
A truly staggering number.
It is. So this brings us to a crucial point. What's the stated mission of this new office? From both sides, the government's perspective and the UN's, are they saying the same thing?
Well, the government, for its part, acknowledged there were concerns from certain religious groups about what they saw as the, let's say, ideological orientation of UN human rights bodies.
Okay, so they're aware of that pushback.
Definitely. In a press statement, the government clarified the OHCHR mission will, and I'm quoting here, focus on addressing and preventing serious human rights abuses, such as those perpetrated by the previous government, and ensuring accountability for violations.
Accountability seems key.
It does. But they also made a point to clarify that the mission will not promote any social agenda outside the country's established legal, social, and cultural framework.
Ah, setting boundaries there.
Exactly. And crucially, they stress that Bangladesh retains the sovereign authority to withdraw from the agreement if it determines that the partnership no longer aligns with national interests.
That's significant leverage for the government.
Huge leverage. It keeps the government firmly in the driver's seat, in a way.
Okay, so that's the government's line. How does the UN, particularly Volker Turk, frame this? Is it the same emphasis or slightly different?
Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner, he framed it as sending a significant message about Bangladesh's commitment to human rights. He explained the office will better support the implementation of the recommendations provided in our fact-finding reports.
So focused on follow-through from their investigations.
Precisely. The plan is for this new office to engage directly with the government, civil society, other stakeholders, offering technical support, expertise for ongoing fundamental reforms.
Like, what kind of support?
Things like providing training and technical assistance to various government agencies, helping them fulfill both national and international human rights obligations, and also working to enhance the capacity of public institutions and civil society actors. It's very much focused on building, long-term human rights infrastructure.
It sounds pretty comprehensive, actually. And you mentioned those fact-finding reports. What were some of the specific, concrete recommendations that came out of that UN mission?
They were quite detailed, quite pointed. They call for independent investigations and prosecutions for killings, torture, enforced disappearances, sexual violence, gender-based violence.
Okay, the major abuses.
Yes. And on police and security sector reforms, they got very specific. Reduce the use of lethal force, ban certain types of ammunition, reform police training, establish an independent police oversight commission.
An independent one, that's key.
Absolutely. And even disbanding the Rapid Action Battalion, the RAB, which has been implicated in so many abuses over the years.
Wow, disbanding RIB, that's huge.
It is. They also advised ending unlawful surveillance of journalists, activists, political opponents, and holding independent inquiries into those surveillance practices.
It's a lot. I mean, these aren't just minor tweaks, are they?
Not at all. It signals a fundamental shift being demanded in Bangladesh's whole security apparatus.
And is there also hope that this UN presence might sort of lift the game for local watchdogs, like Bangladesh's National Human Rights Commission, the NHRC?
Yes, exactly. The NHRC currently lacks binding or enforcement powers. And crucially, it can't independently investigate abuses by police, military, or other state agencies. So the hope is the UN office might help raise the bar there.
Right. Create a better environment for them.
Potentially. Some see this increasing UN presence as signaling maybe Bangladesh's growing willingness to be transparent, to start chipping away at that culture of impunity that's become so entrenched in state institutions.
But it's not universally welcomed, right? You mentioned protests.
That's right. It's important context. The opening of this office was actually preceded by protests from certain religious groups, including Hafazati Islam and Islami Andalan Bangladesh. So clearly, not everyone welcomes this kind of international oversight.
Okay. This focus on accountability, though, it pulls us into a much more contested area, doesn't it? The UN's alleged role in Bangladesh's recent political shifts, there seem to be wildly different stories out there.
Absolutely. And one source, Hindu Post, makes a very strong claim. They assert the UN played a crucial role in ensuring the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina as Prime Minister of Bangladesh.
A crucial role. That's a big statement.
It is, and this source goes further. It alleges that Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner, admitted in a BBC interview that the UN actively discouraged the Bangladesh armed forces from taking action against anti-government protesters.
Discouraged the military.
Then the Hindu Post article controversially claims these protesters were, and this is a direct quote, in reality, members of extremist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and Hamas.
Wow. That's quite an allegation against the protesters.
It is. And the source concludes that the UN essentially facilitated but also played a pivotal role in the jihadist coup that overthrew the Sheikh Hasina government on August 5, 2024. It's a very specific, very charged narrative from that particular source. We have to stress that.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's one quite extreme perspective. Now, for an alternative view on that same 2024 student movement, another source, 360 Info, provides a much more detailed analysis.
Right. And they offer important historical context. It's explained that historically, student activism in Bangladesh has tended to be more secular, more leftist.
Okay.
However, the 2024 protests reportedly had a, quote, pronounced religious undertone, with some factions apparently emphasizing Islamic identity over Bengali nationalism. This is where it gets really complex and nuanced.
Definitely sounds like it.
And what's fascinating here is that the interim government chief advisor, Muhammad Yunus himself, stated the protests were a meticulously designed agitation, designed to remove Sheikh Hasina from power, and that, in his view, masses and students were misled by the conspirators.
Misled by conspirators. Interesting phrasing.
It is. This source, 360 Info, notes that some protesters used Sheikh Mujib's quotations, wore the national flag, sang the national anthem seemingly to manipulate public sentiment.
Using nationalist symbols.
Exactly. It also explicitly mentions that organizations like Jamaat Islami, its student wing Islami Chhatar Shabir, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and other Islamic fundamentalist groups were reportedly part of this student movement.
So a mix of actors involved.
Apparently so. And according to this source, after August 5, 2024, the hidden influence of Islamist forces became evident.
Became more obvious after the change in government.
That's what this course suggests. It highlights a deeply rooted religio-linguistic divide in Bangladesh. A contest, really, over national identity. Is it primarily Bengali cultural identity or Islamic identity?
That's a fundamental tension.
It really is. And the source discusses how memory, especially of the 1971 Liberation War, is both unifying and divisive. Different political ideological groups interpret that history in conflicting ways. It just shows the complexity of the internal dynamics. It wasn't just simple student protests.
Far from it. Okay, let's maybe zoom out now. Look at some of the broader challenges, the critiques that human rights watchdogs face, not just in Bangladesh, but more generally. First, what about the local human rights NGOs in Bangladesh? What's their operating environment like?
Well, our sources suggest their overall role is often described as dubious, which essentially means they face huge obstacles and often cannot play an effective role in promoting human rights.
Why is that?
Several reasons. The government reportedly tries to limit their function through things like oppression, harassment of NGO officials.
Direct pressure.
Yes. Plus, you have ruling elite intervention in their activities, the country's entrenched culture of impunity we talked about, the NGO's own dependence on foreign donations.
The funding issue.
Right, which can make them vulnerable. Then there are restrictive laws, and sometimes even the financial conditions and political interests of the NGOs themselves can be factors. And on top of all that, existing institutions like the judiciary and the NHRC are often seen as ineffective.
It sounds like they're navigating a minefield, really. Obstacles from every direction.
Pretty much.
But despite all these limitations, this government control you mentioned, do these local NGOs still manage to achieve anything? Do they make a difference?
Well, the sources do note that despite all these huge obstacles, the HR NGOs appear to be more active than the government in upholding human rights.
Okay, so they are pushing where they can.
They're certainly trying.
Yeah.
But connecting this to the bigger picture, the challenges aren't just local. I mean, the UN Human Rights Council itself, the HRC, faces significant criticisms globally. Accusations of systemic bias.
Right. That's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit unsettling. The HRC was set up in 2006, meant to replace the old discredited Commission on Human Rights. So what's its track record actually been like, especially regarding this alleged bias?
Yeah, it turns out the HRC hasn't always been, shall we say, as impartial as you might hope, especially when confronting the world's most serious human rights situations.
How so?
It's often criticized for holding some countries to much higher standards than others, while seeming to ignore situations that are equally bad, or even worse.
Like what? Can you give an example?
Well, the most obvious example cited is its disproportionate focus on Israel. Israel is unique in being subject to its own separate agenda item, Item 7.
Okay.
And get this statistic. From 2006 to May 2023, Israel's was the focus of 103 out of 280 condemnatory resolutions. That's 37%, over a third.
Wow, compared to...
Well, in 2022 alone, Israel was condemned more often than Afghanistan, Myanmar, North Korea, and Syria combined.
And combined, it's quite a disparity.
It is. And the key insight here, according to these critiques, is how this disproportionate focus really undermines the HRC's claims of impartiality. Its ability to confront the world's worst situations without bias.
So while some countries get this intense focus, others, despite documented abuses, seem to get a pass.
That's the accusation. Take China, for example.
Right.
Despite widely documented heinous human rights abuses, pervasive censorship, denial of rights, the crackdowns in Hong Kong, arbitrary arrests, detention, executions, and the alleged genocide or crimes against humanity in Xinjiang.
Which the OHCHR itself reported on, right?
Yes, confirmed by a 2022 OHCHR report. Despite all that, the HRC has, in its entire 17-year history, basically been unwilling or unable to condemn China.
Never formally condemned China.
Never. In fact, in October 2023, the HRC actually voted down an effort to simply hold a debate on that very OHCHR report about Xinjiang.
Voted down even a debate.
Exactly. It really raises serious questions about consistency in applying human rights standards, doesn't it?
It certainly does. What about this Universal Periodic Review, the UPR? That's supposed to be the mechanism for fairness, right? Every country gets reviewed regularly.
In theory, yes. Every country is subject to review every 4 years. But in practice, the sources suggest the UPR often provides an opportunity to obscure rather than reveal problems.
Obscure rather than reveal. How?
Well, for instance, China's 2018 review was apparently marred by the UN's own complicity, with critical submissions from NGOs reportedly removed.
Removed by the UN.
That's what the source alleges. And it suggests the process lacks accountability for falsehoods presented during the review. Plus, look at the numbers again. The U.S. has received significantly more recommendations, over 1,000, than countries like Cuba, Egypt, Iran, and China, which each got around 800 to 900.
More recommendations for the U.S. than for China or Iran.
Significantly more. Which, as our sources point out, strongly suggests a lack of objectivity in how these recommendations are generated or counted.
So why does the HRC seem to fall short like this? Is it baked into its structure?
That seems to be a big part of it. The criteria for getting elected to the HRC are minimal. A country's own human rights record isn't actually disqualifying.
Seriously. You can have a terrible record and still get on the council.
Apparently so. Yeah. And non-democratic countries have actually formed a majority on the HRC in most years since it was established. It was 70% in 2023, for instance.
70% non-democracies.
Yeah. And these clean slate elections, where regional blocs present only as many candidates as there are seats, that makes it even easier for repressive states to get elected.
So reform seems difficult.
Very difficult. Non-democratic states often hold a majority in both the HRC and the General Assembly, and they have little incentive to support reforms that would increase accountability for themselves.
A built-in resistance to change.
Exactly. There are even concerns that just opening a debate on institutional reform could backfire, allowing authoritarian states to propose changes that would weaken the HRC even further. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle, making real reform incredibly challenging.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, our listener? This story about the UN Human Rights Office in Dhaka, it really signals a complex interplay, doesn't it, between national sovereignty, international pressure, and this desperate, urgent need for accountability in a country with a painful history of human rights abuses.
It really does. It highlights how international bodies try to intervene, how they try to help, but also the inherent challenges, the criticisms they face in trying to maintain impartiality and, just be effective on a global stage.
Yeah.
Understanding these dynamics, I think it helps us appreciate the nuances. The nuances of human rights advocacy, whether it's local NGOs battling that entrenched culture of impunity or global institutions like the UN navigating tricky geopolitical realities and their own internal biases.
Yeah.
It's never simple.
Definitely not black and white. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given all these criticisms we've just explored, criticisms of both local and international human rights watchdogs, what fundamental shifts would actually empower them? Empower them to truly ensure justice and accountability in a world where, let's face it, power often seems to outweigh principle? And maybe, what role do you think global citizens play in demanding better? Something to ponder.